Welcome to Tentpole Trauma, the podcast where we look at movies that came with hype and high hopes, but left with crushing disappointment, either critically, at the box office, or both. Freed from the weight of expectations, we seek to examine these underperformers under a new light, parsing through the good, the bad, and everything in between with the hopes of gaining a better understanding as to why they failed to find their audience. Warning, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie that we're discussing today, I suggest you stop the podcast and go watch it. Then when you come back and listen, you'll get more out of the discussion. On this episode, we discuss Saturn 3. Okay, I am Sebastian, and I am here with Jennifer.
Hello.
And welcoming to the podcast our special guest this episode, Mr. Marc Gottlieb.
It is truly an honor to be here for the trauma.
Yay!
It is an honor for us to have you here. Now, Marc Gottlieb is a friend. He is an enthusiast of giallo and horror films. He is also the writer of some pretty incredible asylum mockbusters. You may know his work in Aquarium of the Dead, Triassic World, and Fast and Fierce, Death Race. Now, interestingly, Jennifer and I are currently living in Bend, Oregon, and in Bend, Oregon is the last Blockbuster, the final remaining Blockbuster store. I went in there and I saw Fast and Fierce Death Race, and I was like, holy shit, is that one of Marc's movies? And I picked it up off the shelf just like you would have done back in the day, looked at the DVD cover, and there was your name. I was so proud. So you are up here in Bend, Oregon, being represented.
Well, I couldn't be more thrilled about that. And I actually wish I could see that on the Blockbuster shelf like that. Because I remember when Blockbuster was a thing, you would walk around and go through all the covers and boxes for your evening's enjoyment. And I would look at those boxes, pull them off the shelf, and say, one day my name will be on the back of one of these boxes with DMX on the front of the cover.
Well, that day has come true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Woo!
Woohoo!
I don't want to, I know you probably have to keep these things under wraps, but can you give us any sort of hint about a future mockbuster that might be coming out? Like, did you do like Sand or something, to tie into Dune?
They didn't approach me for that one, but I'm sure we'll be seeing an announcement soon. Actually, no, I don't, believe it or not, even the stuff I can't talk about, there's nothing that will be a familiar version of a certain title that you may have heard about elsewhere. So nothing for me on that front at the moment.
Is the next thing that you are involved with, does it come straight from the mind of Marc Gottlieb? Is it like an original thing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of originality in there based upon other people telling me the direction I need to go.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we look forward to that when it hits the shelves of the local Blockbuster.
Yeah, now really, really cool.
I'll send you a picture or whatever. Next time I go in there, I'll take a photo for you so you can see yourself on the wall of history.
Yes. Love it.
But we're not here to talk about mockbusters today. We're here to talk about Saturn 3. I don't know if a lot of our listeners will be familiar with this movie. We wanted Mark as a guest, and so I threw a bunch of titles out to him, and he said, Saturn 3. That's the one that really jumps out at me.
Right.
So it's going to be a nice little segue into October. We're doing a little sci-fi, which was what we usually sort of cover here, but well, we're doing horror in October, and this is sort of a sci-fi horror film that really sort of came on the wake of Alien. It was released in 1980, the year after Alien, and was generally seen as an Alien ripoff.
Right.
Mark, what sort of memory or history do you have with Saturn 3?
Well, it's funny that you pretty much mapped it out. You know, the poster for this movie has Hector, the crazy looking robot on it.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, you've seen movies like Alien, you've seen, you know, the knockoffs that came out and everything afterwards. So you're expecting this movie with a crazy ass robot going around killing everyone on board of whatever ship they're on, and Farrah Fawcett.
Yeah.
So as a 10-year-old boy, I'm thinking this is going to be the greatest film ever made. You know, and when you mentioned the list of movies and when you said Saturn 3 was on there, I said, you know what? This is the moment where all these years later, it can possibly redeem itself in my young eyes, because now I can watch it expecting the movie they made, not expecting the movie that I had in mind at that age. And
yeah, how'd that work out for you?
It's funny. There are moments in the movie that happened, and I went, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And of course, we'll get into the 2 or 3 well, I don't know if you say famous moments because there's nothing famous about this film, but there are infamous, I guess, moments that are affiliated with it that people go, "Oh yeah, I've seen Saturn 3. Oh, I know about that." Yeah, I remember certain moments happening and everything, but you know, there's a different context now because I'm watching it, you know, older now and with a different maturity for watching films. Although maturity is probably the wrong word, but I actually really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it for what they tried to do, for what they had on screen. I mean, there's a lot of stuff lacking, and there are a lot of things that, like I said, we'll get into that, I'm sure. You know, that aren't there that should be, but the core premise, there's something about it that I really dug. I really enjoyed.
It definitely has a certain quality about it that I think if you're a fan of schlocky sci-fi and horror, like there's a lot to enjoy here. Now, yeah. Jennifer, do you have any memory of Saturn 3 at all?
No memory of Saturn 3. As a matter of fact, when you said this was the film we were going to watch, I was confusing it with Capricorn 1. And I was like, yeah. Which I have seen. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah, Capricorn 1. And that's in my brain. I was like totally thinking that these, because the names are familiar and they're around the same time. So I hadn't even seen this, but I was excited to watch it because I love Farrah Fawcett and Harvey Keitel and Kirk Douglas. I mean, it's a great cast. I like sci-fi, but I really am mostly into horror. And so sci-fi horror is a sweet spot for me. So I was interested to check it out. And it's a time period that I really like for cinema. But I went into it cold. This was the first time I had seen it.
Now, the big selling point for this movie and the person who receives top billing over Kirk Douglas is Farrah Fawcett. This was her time. She was coming off of Charlie's Angels, only having been on it in one season. There was that famous poster that was in every person's bedroom who was of a certain age at that time. I, of course, was well aware of Farrah Fawcett, and like Mark, when this movie came out, I was like, holy shit, Farrah Fawcett's in a movie? But I didn't see it at the time. Mark, what was your childhood memory of Farrah Fawcett?
It was obviously Charlie's Angels. I used to watch her on that show, and then I knew of Lee Majors. I knew that they were married, and I used to like his $6 Million Man, but I also liked The Fall Guy. So you know, I kind of knew her from her persona more so than the shows she was in. Besides Charlie's Angels, the fact that she's in a really strange sci-fi horror thing was really the thing for me that was like, okay, this is going to be what I remember her for. She definitely tries to carry the film. You know, they give her they don't give anybody a lot to do in this movie at all, but they do kind of position her in this role where she's kind of the central point of the proceedings.
Yes, and that was not how the movie was originally conceived. Once she was brought on board, they sort of repurposed it all around her. But Jen, you are a big Charlie's Angels fan, right?
Yes, I am. Huge Charlie's Angels fan. I loved Farrah. Just being aware of her growing up, she's just so pretty. And I think she's great in this. I mean, I think she's, just a beautiful, sweet character. And I don't know, I'm totally here for it.
Great might be a strong word.
No, I think for what it is, I mean, who else were you going to want in this role?
She's no Sigourney Weaver, let's be honest.
No,
if we're talking acting.
She holds her own with Kirk. I mean,
yeah.
She's there to play a certain role, a certain, kind of, I guess, stereotype in a way. But she does it well.
I think so.
And, and Kirk doesn't keep looking at her like he doesn't want to be in the frame with her. I mean, she's definitely holding her own in every scene that they're in together. And they have a great chemistry together.
Yes.
I'm sure he wanted to be in the frame with her. Plenty.
I think he definitely did. And I mean, even, and we'll get into this, but when we were watching the Blu-ray, we were watching some of the deleted scenes because that's a highlight later. But even seeing like some of it where they weren't like getting into the scene just yet, like you could just kind of see their interaction and their dynamic, and they seem to really be having a good time.
Well, you know who wasn't having a good time, and that was Harvey Keitel. He apparently did not like director Stanley Donen, so much to the fact that he wouldn't come in to do his looping, which is why it is looped by a different person. So if you're coming to this movie hoping to get some like hardcore Harvey Keitel action, you might be a little disappointed because his voice is not his voice. But let's talk a minute about the production of this movie. This movie was originally conceived by John Barry, who was the visual effects guy on Star Wars. And this was his idea, basically Frankenstein in space. And he conceived of it actually before Alien even came out. So even though this was definitely released on the hype of Alien, it was not conceived that way. And if you know anything about the way movies are made, you know that it's pretty hard to get a movie made in a year. So this had to have been in the works beforehand. But they definitely rode that Alien hype. But John Barry apparently couldn't actually direct people. So the producer of the film, director Stanley Donen of Singing in the Rain and Charade.
And Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Yes. He had to step in and take over this crazy sci-fi movie, which he felt like he was completely inadequate to do. He was not familiar with sci-fi, but they needed somebody who could actually direct, so he stepped in. They apparently gave the script to Farrah Fawcett, like on a plane or something.
Yeah, he was sitting across the aisle from her on a flight. I think Yvette Mimieux had the script first.
Oh, wow.
And gave it to Donen.
Wasn't he originally coming on the film like as a producer though?
Stanley Donen?
Yeah, he was going to be involved with the film, but right. Okay, that's what I thought because I'd read something that he was actually interested in getting into like sci-fi or more kind of horror type things because he wanted to like reach a more contemporary audience or something along the lines of that. He was interested in it, but yeah, he came on as a producer, I guess, and then became the director by default.
Well, I think even more so than Alien, this was post Star Wars, and post Star Wars, everybody was wanting to get into the sci-fi game. So it doesn't surprise me that he was thinking about it, but yeah, I think he didn't think of himself as somebody who could direct sci-fi. Yeah. He just didn't feel like he had a grasp on it. And then perhaps maybe shows a little in the movie.
I think by the time the flight was over, they had a deal for her to be in the movie.
Apparently, the role was not a big role to begin with. So once she came on, they rewrote most of the script to feature her more heavily, which is why she's such a major part of the movie, which I think is definitely to the movie's benefit, because if it was just mostly Kirk Douglas versus Harvey Keitel and the robot, I think that dynamic would have gotten kind of stale. So I think her involvement definitely improved the movie for what it's worth. So the movie begins with this crazy sort of 70s style sci-fi intro. You know, we've got the cheesy sort of synth music that is apparently Elmer Bernstein is the composer.
Right.
Who was not known for this kind of shit.
No.
And I commented when we were watching this, I really like the music. I like the music throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, the main theme especially is actually really good. Why? I'm surprised it hasn't been sampled by like Fatboy Slim or some, electronica artist, or even like a hip hop tune or some kind, because it's got a very catchy kind of few notes in there that are perfect for a sample.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool. It's not necessarily what you might want for like your intense sci-fi horror movie. It's no Jerry Goldsmith alien music, right. But it's still it's pretty fun to listen to. And interestingly, we have the Shout Factory Blu-ray, because I actually bought the Blu-ray of this as soon as it came out, because I was like, I gotta have fucking Saturn 3 on Blu-ray. And the weird thing is when you put in the Saturn 3 Blu-ray, it defaults to the 5.1 mix, and we don't have 5.1 in either of our TVs here. So we got this really bizarre mix where you couldn't hear any of the like middle channel.
Oh.
So at the first 5 minutes we were watching this, it was all just the crazy music and sound effects, and there was no dialogue, and it was like watching some bizarre silent film or something.
I was kind of here for it though. Like I was like, well, it's a choice. This is what they're doing. And I was like, I was with it. Seb was like, I can't believe you were able to like figure out what was going on. But I was like, I guess this is just how it's starting, is, because it was like literally the first scene and going into like the locker room and all of that happening, like where we're getting the music and
background noise. It's the stuff that you would hear in like the rear speakers.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the ambient stuff and music, but the dialogue wasn't there at all. It was really weird.
Let me ask you a question. I was going to buy the Blu-ray as well, but I couldn't get it in time. So I actually watched it on Amazon Prime. We start the movie and it's just silence. Is it silence on the credits?
Yes.
Okay.
It takes forever for any music at all to start.
No sound. It's silence, and I'm messing with all. I'm like, wait a minute. This is wait, what? And I'm messing with all the the buttons on the remote, and I'm screwing around with the receiver. I'm like, is there no sound? And then it goes to picture of Saturn, and there's still no sound. So I'm like, well, maybe the volumes. I'm cranking the volume to like all the way up to 80 on the TV, and then all of a sudden it just whoosh is in with this noise. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm turning it back down. So that was their approach, was just silence.
Yeah, that was the mix.
Yeah.
I think, maybe they were trying to like give the silence of space before the first ship appears. Back in the late 70s, every sci-fi movie in space had to start with a ship coming into frame, like Star Wars had done. And it doesn't really make sense in this movie because they start at like a space station or something. Like, this isn't the ship that we're going to be on. This isn't where we're going. It's just like, let's just have a starship. And let's just talk briefly about the special effects, which are definitely not up to snuff for post Star Wars. Like, the special effects in this movie are fun if you have an affinity for sci-fi pre-Star Wars. There's definitely a lot of mid-70s dystopia, Logan's Run-y type of stuff going on, even in terms of the design. But the actual ships and stuff are like Flash Gordon, not even 1980 Flash Gordon, like serial Flash Gordon. They're way too small. They clearly they're not using whatever the computer technology that Lucas used to make spaceships look like they're flying in space. So it's definitely a cheesy sort of vibe you're getting right off the bat, especially with the ships. But I kind of enjoy it.
And the funny part is that first ship that's coming in, which I guess is the station where he leaves from, as it's coming into frame from the top, it's like, okay, it's clearly a miniature. They did, they've done some detailed work on it. It's fine. But then there's this disc hanging off the bottom of it that's all warped. And I'm trying to think, okay, how is that part of the actual ship? Because it literally looks like they put the miniature under a hot lamp by mistake when they went to lunch. And the bottom panel of it got all warped. And they just left it. And they just like, well, we don't have time for this. We'll just shoot it and we'll futz with it later. And then they didn't. But it was so distracting because these are modest miniatures that are wonderfully enjoyable nowadays. But I think there's something wrong with this thing. And it was so distracting that I'm just like, okay, this is clearly a miniature and it doesn't look right.
So we enter into this space station and we go through this scene where they're calling for Captain James to come out and get in his shuttle, and they're preparing his shuttle. These really creepy sort of, helmeted men are coming up from like this Caldor-like horizon, filling this ship with something we don't know what they're filling it with, but we will find out later. And meanwhile, Captain James is running late or some shit. Like he's like racing to get to the ship, and he goes to the locker room, and this dude in a helmet and a crazy awesome green spacesuit with like this black piping, which I love.
Yeah, it's really
the
cool.
Spacesuit.
Yeah, it's
an
really
awesome
great.
Spacesuit.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is Benson, and we're learning because Captain James is like, "Oh, hey Benson, I hear you failed your exam. I hear you're unstable."
He only had 88 minutes to get everything out, man. I mean, they got to go right to it.
Here's my advice to you. Don't say to the unstable person, "I hear you're unstable." Because what Benson does is like, he opens up the airlock. It sucks James right out and like into these like wires that they've got set up outside the airlock. And he gets like diced up into like 4 pieces. It's actually kind of shocking.
Yeah, but it was pretty cool too. You're like, holy shit, he just literally got cut into 4 pieces.
Right out the gate.
Going back to the director of the film real quick. That opening you mentioned where all this crazy shit going on in this space station, I guess. And they have those guys walking up the stairs, but they're in perfect choreographed formation.
Right.
Like it's the start of a Busby Berkeley number.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, we clearly have, again, there's a musical director on board. So you think, okay, well, he's clearly, this is the opening of the movie. He's got to choreograph the shit out of it to really bring you into it. And it really feels like they're all going to just burst into a musical number.
Totally.
Which now is making me bringing me into the film a lot quicker. And I'm really starting to love that aspect of it. And I was really waiting to see where he went with that.
So what happens is Benson basically assumes the identity of Captain James and gets into the shuttle and takes off, and we get this space journey to Saturn III, and like he goes through the rings of Saturn, and we see these rocks sort of hitting his ship and stuff. Definitely not up to snuff again in a post-Star Wars, post-2001 era, which I do feel like it's kind of trying to do a little 2001 here with the music and the ship. But for enjoyable cheese factor, it's a pretty fun little sequence to watch.
Absolutely. I could agree more.
The shuttle arrives at the Saturn III space station, which is a space station built to create food through hydroponics. That's what they're doing. And the 2 people manning this space station are Adam, played by the 64-year-old at the time Kirk Douglas, and Farrah as Alex, who was 32 at the time, so he's literally twice her age. And they are doing it. Like, they are in love. And it's like right away, their sexual dynamic is established. They're just all over each other.
Yeah.
It's quite a surprise.
They're by themselves. They're out in the middle of space. There's nobody around, and they couldn't be more thrilled that it's just the 2 of them out there growing food for Earth that apparently, I guess, is in chaos or has been destroyed. Or you never quite get the full story on that, but apparently they need to start growing food out by Saturn for Earth.
I figured it was just like Earth now,
All right, so totally a lot more relatable today than it was in 1980.
I love their whole setup, and I love their dynamic when Benson arrives. Benson's all business and like ready to set up and like get going, and they're like, "Hey, no, let's have a drink first."
Yeah,
and like,
they're trying
trying to like, and it's just, I'm so enjoying this. Like they're just, like you said, they're just kicking it out there, happy as they could be by themselves, and they seem like a good time.
They've been there 3 years, and Alex Farrah has never been to Earth. So that's sort of their dynamic. Throughout the whole movie, she's going to keep asking questions about Earth, and Kirk Douglas is like, it's a shithole. Why would you want to go there? So that's kind of a thread that runs through it. We get our first look at Harvey Keitel as Benson, the guy who committed the murder in the first scene, who we hadn't seen because he was wearing this cool black helmet that looks very much like something a character would wear in Star Wars, whatever. But he takes off the helmet and it's Harvey Keitel with a fucking ponytail.
And dubbed in this voice that kind of sounded like William Shatner to me. Yeah.
Did he sound kind of like William Shatner?
Yeah, it's Shatner, and you're sitting there going, because I didn't realize that about the whole thing where he wouldn't loop his lines. So I was sitting there going, he's dubbed, but it sounds like him. Because they're trying to do the accent he has, but it's not always there, but it's kind of popping in and out. And I'm like, okay, maybe I was, again, distracted for half of the movie with his voice because it's clearly not him.
And you're a guy that watches tons of giallos all the time where it's all dubbed, so you're used to it. How distracting must it have been if you're being distracted?
Yeah, I should have went to that a lot quicker.
Well, I mean, it's weird though when it's somebody that you know their voice really well.
Yeah, that's the thing. Especially, and because you associate Harvey Keitel with that kind of gruff New York accent. It has that kind of voice, and even if, despite the fact he's a lot younger, obviously, so his voice may sound a little different. It's components of his typical voice are absolutely missing.
It's very, it took a while to get used to that. I mean, I've seen his earlier films, but I guess I've just gotten used to seeing him as an older person now. So it's just been a minute. So at first I was like, wow, ooh, Harvey Keitel looking good, like young. And then then he started talking and I was like, what's going on? I mean, it's very odd. But I think he looks great. The ponytail is I don't know. That was a choice.
Well, there seemed to be a function to it too, as we find out later in the movie.
He lifts his ponytail later, and we see that he's got like a data port underneath it, which he then connects to the robot mentally. Yeah. But before we get there, one thing that is definitely retained from the Harvey Keitel that we know is that he is a total dick. Immediately. They're all trying to be nice to him, and he's just like, don't touch that. He's just immediately calling Kirk Douglas obsolete.
Yeah.
And they're trying to make him comfortable, and they invite him into their cool 70s sex pad where they hang out and drink all the time, I guess.
They got the music going in the background. They got a Wi-Fi system. And I love how, like you said, he comes on like a total dick. He walks in there, and he's there for 5 minutes. He's like, your research is 2 months behind. He's trying to insinuate that they're doing nothing out there. What the hell is going on? He's basically saying we're starving on Earth because of you two.
And you're a fuckfest.
You just got here, dude. I mean, once you ease into that after at least the first evening.
But even worse, he's hanging out with Farrah later, Alex, and he's like, may I use your body? You have an incredible body. May I use it? And she's like, no. And he's like, well, but back on Earth, that's what we do. Everybody just gets to just pleasure ourselves with each other's bodies. And she's like, no, thanks. I'm with
Adam, or the Major, she calls him.
Or the Major.
Whatever. Yeah.
The Major. So Benson's putting down the Major and trying to get with Alex right away, which is, creating a pretty uncomfortable dynamic. And a lot of things that happen in this movie are sort of viewed over video monitors or heard over comm links or whatever. Whenever they're having these sort of exchanges, we'll see Kirk Douglas watching and reacting to it well, that dickhead or whatever.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that scene where Harvey Keitel comes on really strong. He manages to, in one scene, in the course of about 2 minutes, bring up drug use, dog eating, casual sex, and voyeurism.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, for a guy who's got that kind of attitude, you figure it'd be a hell of a lot more fun when he gets to the ship.
He is not a good time. He's not a good time at all. He's such a creep. And then all of these things are established, like you said, so quickly. And then what's also established is that there's an eclipse coming, so he's not going to be leaving for 22 days.
And to add to his creepiness, they have the dog on the ship at the space station. Sally. And when the dog knows there's something right with this guy. The introduction to the dog is Harvey Keitel picking it up and looking it right in the asshole.
Yeah.
Yep.
Holding it up.
And then talking about eating it.
Yes.
So right there, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I was completely wrong on this film when I was 11 years old. This movie's amazing so far.
Yeah, another thing that's kind of amazing is, as Mark mentioned, Harvey Keitel likes to trip balls. He's got these pills. He's got a lot of pills, but one of the pills that he's really trying to get Farrah to take are called Blue Dreamers. Mm-hmm. And they basically are MDMA or X or something, is from what I gather. But he's like, I need some rest. I need to take my Blue Dreamers. And she's like, what are those? And he's like, you've never taken them? Here, why don't you take one? And she's like, no. But he gives her one anyway. And then she takes that back to Adam. And he's like, oh, we don't want to do that. But then they do end up, just a few scenes later, they end up cutting up the Blue Dreamer in half and taking it. Now, Mark, did you have the pleasure of watching the deleted scene here?
No, I haven't seen it, but I've read about it.
So you are aware of it?
I'm aware of some of it, yeah. I wish again, this is why I was so pissed I didn't have the Blu-ray, because apparently the deleted scene is on there. This
deleted scene is my favorite deleted scene of all deleted scenes. And I said that when we watched it. I was like, this should have been why was this not in the film? A lot of time you see deleted scenes, you're like, yeah, I can see why that was cut. Not here.
Well, I can see why, for a story reason, it was cut, because there's absolutely nothing pertaining to the plot that happens. However, like, Kirk Douglas starts kind of like rolling around on the floor and laughing, and like they're throwing like that globe around or whatever. Oh, yeah. And then Farrah comes out in this fucking insane outfit that's like a black sort of like space dominator.
Yeah, with these crazy winged shoulders.
Yeah.
Like
yes. That. Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
Apparently that outfit was used, I think, in the trailer or some of the promo stuff.
Promotional stills, yeah.
Yeah. What she says, like what that outfit is, it was her debutante outfit or something. This is what she was going to debut in, which is just like, it's insane. And also, like, she's been like, she and Adam are just hanging out, and she's got like her normal Farrah hair going on, which is gorgeous. But when she disappears, and like literally she's gone for just like a few moments in this scene, she's in like her loungewear also that she's like hanging out in most of the time, like her white kind of see-through-y comfortable loungewear. She like literally goes off screen for like moments and comes back in this crazy outfit and like makeup, and the hair is up and curled and everything. It's so drastic. It's a complete 180, and it's wonderful.
It's pretty awesome. So like, while we're sort of talking about this sort of fashion and all that sort of element, let's talk a little bit about like the production design. The production design for this is a big left turn from what was going on with Star Wars and Alien and stuff, where they were doing sort of like a used future thing where the ships are sort of lived in and dirty. I mean, there is sort of a lived in element to this space station, but it's also kind of bonkers because like the hallways are all black, but then you get like these primary colored tubes running through it. It's kind of awesomely weird. Like, it definitely fits in well, I think, with the music too. Like, it kind of creates a weird vibe, like you're in some sort of almost disco space station or something.
Yeah,
very 70s.
It also reminded me of Space Mountain at Disney a little bit. Like that's what or like kind of like the whole like Tomorrowland vibe, actually. Like when Disney in the 70s and 80s, like the future.
Yeah, the whole thing has this artifice about it that it feels like it's a set, but they've gone so over the top with it that you can't help but just be completely sucked into it. And every scene they're in, I was looking more at the background and the sets and the production design of everything, because it's absolutely compelling. There's so much going on. There's colors and lights and flares and there's a lot of movement in the whole film. The camera's constantly moving, so you get to see more of the sets around them. And it's that's what sold me on the film as it went on, was how great it looked in terms of its design. I think there's a little bit of Alien Giger-esque kind of stuff with the hallways have kind of an oval sort of shape with some sort of like brocade at the top or whatever. If that's even the right word.
And it's kind of biomechanically looking with tubing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So I was drawn in by all that. But then, there's the areas where there's the hydroponics areas where there's, the grass and the trees and everything. So it was a really cool mixture of like you said, the biomechanical stuff, but also with the green, lush areas, sort of peppered in. Say what you want about the movie overall. I think it has an aesthetic about it that is I think one of the biggest selling points of the movie overall.
Well, and tying into that aesthetic, we get to our sort of main event, which is Hector, the killer robot. Now, in all of his little containers that he's brought, Benson has what he calls the first of the demigod series of robots, which has this brain that's in a giant tube that is grown from fetuses. Okay.
I think it's multiple brains. It would look like it was, I don't know if it was just one brain.
Yeah, it's definitely bigger than one brain.
They're packed together, I think.
Yeah, it's really, really disturbing.
I took it was just as like a mass made from fetuses that was a brain.
Sounds good.
This brain is somehow programmable or whatever. It gets a little fuzzy here with the details. Basically, you can program this brain to be as smart as a human or whatever. Why the robot is called Hector, it makes no sense.
Well, they try to tie it in later with that sort of weird kind of like they mentioned Troy, Hector was Achilles and all that.
Yes.
They at least make an attempt to kind of throw in some sort of reference of some kind.
I wish that Hector had been like an anagram or whatever, like hepatic, electronic.
It's like chomps.
Yeah, exactly. I forget what you call those, but I wish they like, well, it's the blah, 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 spells out Hector.
Right.
But no, that's not the case. But Hector is a pretty interesting design because he's sort of humanoid, right?
Yeah.
But he's got a torso
right.
with like musculature on it, but he's also got these tubes that go through him. And the tubes have liquid that runs through them,
which looks really cool when it actually goes through when they inject it through the tubes.
Totally. And his head is like this little tiny sensor with like two sensors for eyes and like a third sensor for, I don't know, a nose or a mouth or whatever. It's on its own little sort of robotic arm. And the image of Hector was definitely the thing that I remember most as a kid. I would go through the papers, the weekend papers, and look for movie posters of movies I wanted to see. And I remember just looking at Hector like, oh my God, I got to see Saturn 3. Look at that thing. That must be the most terrifying robot of all time. Sadly, I did not get to see the movie until much later. But yeah, Hector is a pretty crazy fucking design for a robot.
Hector's head in particular reminded me of, is it Johnny Five?
Yeah.
The short circuit robot? That's what I was reminded of. I was like, that's a choice for the head like that with everything else going on.
Yeah, it's weird. It's creepy in its own right. The fact that it's this little tiny little, you can't really describe it. It's just this sort of weird apparatus that's supposed to be its head with these spindly sensor eyes on this massive hulking, again, going along with the fact it's Frankenstein in space, the fact it's a Frankenstein type creature. You wonder, what would the alternative be? I mean, can you come up, you almost wonder the way they built this thing. I wonder if any kind of head that would be what we would expect to be for some fearsome robot would just look bizarre, even more weird on that body.
Well, we'll see it later.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. Which I actually loved. So that was great. Yeah. It strangely works for me because it's so bizarre and so there were questions and answers here, but that makes it creepier.
I get the feeling that and I have no trivia or anything to back this up, but I get the feeling that they were kind of focused on like practical robotics in a lot of ways, because there are practical robotics that are in the lab, and you know there's all different types of robotic arms and robotic mechanical things going on. So there's some of that incorporated to Hector, because he has these like arms that aren't like human arms. They're more like those kind of robot arms, and he's got these cool fingers that can like do keypads and stuff, but the way they work is really not finger-like. Right. It's kind of cool. There's definitely very cool disparate elements that are all kind of like thrown into this weird blender to make Hector. I feel like they were trying to out-weird the alien maybe a little bit. Like I think they were like, we can't just have him be like the robot from Lost in Space or whatever. Right. It's got to be something crazy. Right. So I think that's where Hector came from. So, some fevered designer, but I kind of love him. He's compelling to look at.
Yeah.
I agree. And I like what Mark said. I don't know what other head I would put on him. I mean, I don't know what else would work. He works the way that he is, and he's really off-putting and interesting to look at. And they did put a lot of money into Hector. I did read, I think it was on IMDb, like I think they spent like $1 million or something to build Hector. That's a lot of money then to build this robot.
And I read also that it didn't work as well as they'd hoped. Yeah. But that's, you kind of expect that with these behind the scenes production stories now. But yeah, I guess there were multiple different arms and different heads and different parts for different shots, and they didn't work.
Yeah, sometimes you can tell they're doing like stop motion or something to make him work. Sometimes he seems to be working in some sort of mechanical way. Yeah. Obviously, there's got to be a person in the sort of torso part, like, because he walks around with like normally type robot legs. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously a suit actor involved as well, but yeah, it seems like a lot of shit going on. Right. And I'm sure half the time it wasn't working at all. Yeah. The deal is with Hector is that Benson, as we said, has this link in the back of his head underneath his ponytail called a direct input, or whatever is what he calls it. And he can link his mind to Hector and therefore allow Hector to learn quickly or whatever. But the great thing is, like, so he sets up Hector, and then like he just like bursts into Alex and Adam's like sex room with Hector. Like, I got Hector set up, and they're like, what are you doing in here? And he's like, come see my robot or whatever. And then like they go play chess,
which is a great scene, by the way. I love how they did that. Yeah, and there's a whole subplot with Kirk Douglas where he's inadequate. He keeps calling him obsolete. The idea that he's this old guy who's dating this this girl half his age, and he keeps saying, look, it's inevitable you're going to leave me. And the idea now that the robot, Harvey Keitel wants to replace Kirk Douglas to be, he wants to start using Farrah Fawcett's body, and he wants to sub for him. And now it's the moment where Kirk Douglas and the robot meet, and it's going to be a meeting of the minds over a chess game. And it's so awkward to watch in a lot of ways, because Kirk Douglas is sort of sitting there, and this robot's like 8 feet tall, so he's kind of looking up at him. But the chess pieces are super cool, and they clearly put some design into them. And he's talking about how I remember the idea they're talking about sacrifice. So you can't teach the robot sacrifice, which is something you need for chess, I guess, to win chess.
Which is important.
Yes,
sacrifice is an important theme.
The setup.
Yes, and so they set that all up, and it's a moment where they're really trying in this film to really put forth a theme, a story, and that's the moment where you really feel like, all right, everything's working together as it should. It's a fleeting moment, and again, like I said, it's all sort of awkwardly staged in a way, and because Harvey Keitel is sort of standing there watching all this happen, and it's like he's just, and the robot's doing all the work, but Keitel is the one that's sort of behind it, so it's just a weird the way they stage the scene. It's just kind of awkward, but it's really cool to watch all the stop motion of the robot picking up the pieces. It works for a while, and then it kind of falls apart.
Hey, Tentpole listeners, lend us your ears for a brief moment so we can tell you about our new sponsor, Anchor. Have you ever wondered how we've managed to get this scintillating podcast up on all the platforms you crave? The secret to that is Anchor. I'm going to be honest with you. We had no clue whatsoever how to get a podcast out there to the masses. It would have probably taken us weeks to figure that stuff out, draining our enthusiasm and causing us to while away the hours on technical details that didn't interest us and made us wish we were dead, or at least doing something more fun. Thankfully, we didn't have to do that because we had Anchor.
Anchor is the all-in-one platform for podcast. It can help with every aspect related to podcasting, from creating your podcast to monetizing it, distributing it to all the major platforms, and monitoring your downloads and listeners. They'll even host your podcast for free. In fact, all of this is free, and it frees up your time, allowing you to get your podcast started and out to listeners, allowing you more precious time to spend watching unboxing videos, ordering hilarious novelty shirts, or arguing online about Star Wars.
Yes, this is a shameless plug, but for something we truly use and believe in. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place.
Download the free, did we mention it's free? Anchor app through your preferred app store, or go to anchor.fm to get started.
I think you're hitting on something that's really key as to why this movie kind of doesn't gel. It's that sort of awkwardness that you're talking about. Like, I feel like that kind of permeates every element of this movie. Like, things don't quite fit together. You know what I mean? Like, all the parts are kind of cool, but they kind of don't fully gel. And I think that that's part of the reason is you have this director who's not really the original vision, who's now got to deal with it. You've got all these sort of moving parts going on. So yeah, it's something about it where it just kind of doesn't quite all fit together. They're like puzzle pieces that are like kind of not quite there. And like, I feel like it's edited in a way that's like the cuts are all really like they're trying to cut it down. You can tell like the things probably were breathing more, and they've like, you know, because there'll be scenes with Farrah and Kirk Douglas talking and they just cut it like, all right, let's just cut it this line. And they cut, you know, like.
And they're trying to get character development out in these scenes, and they don't let any of it breathe. It moves. So for a movie that's supposed to be slow and kind of atmospheric and lumbering in a way, the pacing on it is just really weird. They're just in and out of scenes, like almost like TV cuts, like boom, 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 boom. And it feels like, you know, they were trying to cut around what they had to get to a finished film. They're not letting any of the stuff get out with character development whatsoever.
It's funny you say that, Mark, because my feeling throughout watching the film was it reminded me of TV. Just the vibe of it reminded me of like this, you know, could have been an Outer Limits episode or something. I don't know. Like it had a very TV like feeling to it. And also I was reading about Farrah going on, I think she went on Carson like a few years after this film came out or whatever. And she was like not that great at interviewing. I mean, like even later in life, I don't think it ever got better. She would get really nervous and act kind of weird, and people thought she was on drugs, but she was just like, no, I'm just really uncomfortable. I guess Carson was just like kind of teasing her, and he's like, oh, didn't you make a film a few years back, you know, Saturn 3, and everyone, you know, the audience kind of laughed, and she like got really quiet and uncomfortable and was just like, it was, you know, it was supposed to be like a completely different film than what you ended up seeing. So it does feel like it got chopped up.
I think it's a interesting idea, and I think that the dynamic with all the characters and everything are really cool. Like, it feels like it could have been a really cool movie, but a bunch of things just got kind of messed up along the way, and it doesn't really fit together, and it's cut too quick. But the thing that happens next is basically Hector starts getting horny for Alex. Because Benson is horny for her, and because his personality has been put into this robot, like now Hector's, you know, getting kind of randy for Alex. She like gets some kind of thing like blown into her eye at one point, and like the robot takes the piece out of her eye with tweezers, and that's sort of a tense scene because these like robotic tweezers are like going right up into her eye. Benson has this really weird conversation with the robot where they're sort of like at odds with each other because the robot keeps saying like, you killed someone, and Benson's like, strike that from the record or whatever.
Clear it in your mind. Don't think about that.
I mean, that's what happens when you're sharing your thoughts with a robot. You got to filter that crime out. But yeah, and with the scene with the pulling out the
live chip. It was called a live chip. Yeah.
Live chip. It's super intense because earlier we also see with Hector that, like, I think it was when he went to go play chess, like he took the flask or whatever, the carafe that they have their booze in, and didn't he held it in his hand, he like crunched it.
Yeah.
So Alex is rightfully so terrified that like Hector's coming at her eye with these tweezers because he doesn't really know how to control his strength. That gets established.
I mean, also he crushes the chess piece as well when he loses. I like how they're introducing the idea that the robot keeps saying he murdered somebody because the robot's innocent. And the fact that it's Keitel is sort of putting his mind into the robot and sort of corrupting it in a way. So the robot's kind of fighting against that at first, which is why they're at odds with each other. And I love that idea, the fact that, this robot it's sentient, but it's not fully formed and not fully educated yet. So it's trying to understand the thought process, because the idea was that Keitel said, it'll learn, but it'll take time. So that's when he starts putting the little the thing in his live direct contact. Was that called direct something?
Direct input.
Direct input, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea is that it's flooding this robot's head with all of the dark, corrupt, evil villain stuff that Keitel's got going on in his head. So the robot's kind of fighting against it. And I thought that's a really cool idea that they completely abandoned after the scene's over, like every other idea they've introduced. I mean, this feels like a movie that's, maybe it's 2 hours, maybe 100 hour 45 minutes, which could have had a lot of interesting themes and ideas, and because they introduced these things, but they abandoned a lot of the ideas that they introduce. And I figured if they at least played with some of those and let them get to the end of those strings, those arcs, it'd be a much more interesting film.
Well, I mean, like Alien is 2 hours and like, I don't know, it's like 2 hours and 10 minutes or something. Like it's a long horror movie.
Yeah.
So they should have at least given Saturn 3 that kind of length, because I mean, with sci-fi, you've got to establish a certain amount of world building and stuff. So you need that extra time, like it's not just like a straight horror movie where you can do an hour and a half easily.
Yeah.
With sci-fi, you got to set up all these things. You got to set up the world and all that stuff. So you really do need that time. And if you try to cut it too close, you just lose all of the meat of the movie.
Right. And like I said, when I was a kid, I'm thinking, okay, it's a robot run amok on a ship, killing people left and right. And, if you're going to do an 85-minute version of that, sure, it's a slasher film. But they didn't do that. And so now they're trying to create an atmosphere that they're not letting breathe, they're not letting expand. And that's a big problem with the film. And it's throughout the whole movie. I mean, it permeates the entire film.
Right. And it's not really a slasher situation because you've only got 3 characters.
Right.
Only, you don't have that many people to kill. So
right.
you better be doing something with the characters if that's what you have.
Yeah.
It works against the movie. What happens after this is Hector basically just starts to go crazy. Hector kills poor Sally the dog, like cuts her head right off.
It's brutal. And I had worried ever since we first laid eyes on Sally. I was like, Sally, something bad's going to happen. Sally's not going to make it to the end of Saturn 3.
Sally's pretty obviously marked for death.
Yeah.
But at that point, like, Farrah Fawcett, like, freaks out because rightfully so.
Yeah.
And Hector, like, grabs her by the hands and, like, holds her up off the ground, and she's, like, screaming, and her hands are bleeding and everything. And, like, things just go completely amok. Like, the robot then goes after Benson, and this big thing falls on him. And at one point, Adam comes in and saves Alex, and he's kind of has the opportunity to leave Benson to his own demise, which, he kind of wants to do. He's said throughout the movie, like, we could just kill him. And and then, she's been like, you won't do that. And he's like, yeah, I know, but I should.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So he has the chance to let Benson get killed here, but he won't do it. He saves him.
He's the hero. He can't let that happen.
He proves his heroic bona fides. They end up trapped in a room, and they're like, what are we going to do? We're going to sit in this room now for 23 days? And the robot's like picking away at the door, like pulling pieces of metal off the door. But Adam figures out a plan. The robot's got to charge itself, and so it plugs itself into a wall monitor, and then Adam pushes this lever that just basically just increases all the power into the robot and knocks it down. And then he just takes Keitel to task at that point. He's like, you screwed this all up. You're a failure. Dismantle that robot. The tables have turned on Keitel at that point.
And it's funny, in our conversation, we have not brought up Kirk Douglas very much. We've been focusing, and that's kind of how the movie plays. Yeah, he's in the movie, and he's just walking around in these cool outfits, they're made of Naga hide or something, and that's all you've got, And then the fact that he keeps talking about he's obsolete and too old for Farrah, and that's all he's doing. And finally, that's why I said he's the hero. He's got to save Keitel, because he hasn't really done anything up until that point in the film.
Yeah, and when I feel at that point things kind of change. He becomes really kind of more of a proactive protagonist after that. We're going to see a lot more of Kirk Douglas, if you catch my meaning.
That's right. And by the way, those outfits, Mark, I read also that he loved those outfits so much that he kept them.
They look very comfortable.
See, that's awesome.
So I like to just think of him walking around his house, wearing his Saturn III outfit and just lounge. It does. Everything looked very, very comfortable.
It's a lot of terry cloth, and they've got lots of robes, and they're sort of these very 70s sort of earth tony, terry cloth looking, suede looking kind of outfits. They're pretty chill.
Very comfortable.
Yeah, you mentioned that. It's funny that reminded me of something. So yeah, the idea that Kirk and Farrah are growing food and they're very earthy, and so there's a lot of beige and brown. They're constantly in beige and brown and sort of off white. And then Keitel shows up in this cool ass black and green, outfit. And so I think that's a visual sort of aesthetic they're going for, that Adam and Alex are they're simple of the earth type of people, and then you got Keitel, who's this crazy plan to take over everything.
Not to get too heady with this, but I mean obviously there's Adam, so he's Adam. She's not named Eve, but they live in this garden, and this Satan-like figure comes in, and there's definitely biblical connotations to it. So the next thing that happens is we think that everything's fine now, right? No, because Hector has managed to somehow get into the other robotics that are in the lab, and he basically rebuilds himself by using these robots, which is a cool idea. However, this scene seems to go on forever. They are really wanting to show off these robotic things that they're using, and it's just I watched the movie twice and I timed the second time. I'm like, this is 5 minutes of robot arms picking up robot parts and then putting them together. It's we see the whole fucking thing get rebuilt. I think I might have trimmed this down a little.
Yeah.
They could have lost some of this and given us some other stuff.
Yeah, they could have let some of the scenes with Kirk and Farrah go a little longer instead of we get 8 minutes or 5 minutes of stop motion and animatronics.
It is cool, though, that Hector rebuilds himself. It's a good sort of way to get the monster back in the game. But yeah, this scene takes way too fucking long. It just goes on, and so many hydraulic things moving around. But then what I love, this may be sort of the highlight of the movie for me in terms of just batshit craziness. Benson decides to take all the drugs, right? He's got a thing full of pills, all different crazy colors. One thing that I'm really sad that I wasn't of age in the 70s is there was this idea that in the 70s, people just carried around bags full of multicolored pills. I don't know if you guys ever came across those in real life, but I fucking know I didn't. In movies where the drug dealer would show up and they have a briefcase.
Briefcase? with everything.
Multicolored pills just in rows. I personally did never experience anything like that.
I've been to the Winter Music Conference in Miami, so I've seen something like that in a few hotel rooms at 3 a.m.
Oh man, I'm so jealous.
So it's not totally far off.
I always wanted to see the briefcase full of pills.
Same.
This is more like a FedEx box. They would just sort of pour it out on the bed, and everyone kind of look, whoa, look at all these. And everyone kind of they point at what they want, and then they tell you how much it costs.
All right, well, that makes more sense.
A little more modern day.
So yeah, Benson takes all the drugs, and he's like, I'm going to take Alex with me. So he like busts in on Kirk Douglas and Farrah. Again, they're like getting ready to get it on. She's wearing like this white negligee type of thing. And Kirk Douglas is like, I thought I told you never to come in here again. And friggin' Keitel just grabs Farrah and is like dragging her out like a caveman. And Kirk Douglas gets up full nude and fucking fights him in the hallway. And like Farrah Fawcett's got to like grab Kirk Douglas's like hair and like, pull his head back. And Kirk Douglas still has like at 64, he has like a nice head of hair, nice silvery mane, and he's buck naked. Like I'm sure he had like a sock on or whatever they do to hide the business.
Did he? I don't know, because he looks amazing. Like that, I was like 64. Like, because we see his buns. Like we see that. Yeah. And I was like 64-year-old man with the hair and everything. I was like, good for you. Yeah. Kirk Douglas. Like, no wonder he lived for another 40 years.
The dude only died last year.
Yeah.
At 103.
Yeah.
I was completely in shock. Like, I was like, he is buck ass naked fighting Harvey Keitel. Like, this was wild. Yeah. And it was, but he looks amazing.
And Keitel's in that green vinyl suit.
Yes.
And it's again, back to the awkward style of the movie where, you know, Kirk Douglas on, and he's like furious. He's like, shredding. And then when she pulls his head back, he kind of looks at her, gives her this crazed look like he's going to attack her next. And then you start to think, oh, wait a minute, maybe they're going to play something where maybe Kirk Douglas is actually a robot. He's not really a human. And they're talking about obsolete, maybe. So, and obviously it's not where they go with it, but
that would be a good twist.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because I hadn't seen it in years. So I thought, oh shit, is he like, is it sort of like, not Bishop, the Ian Holm in Alien, where you realize he's a android. I'm thinking, are they going to play that card with this? Because he gives you this crazy look that you're convinced he's not human for a bit. And then he kind of like, overplays I'm going to calm down now. I'm a little too nuts right now. I'm a little too angry. I'm going to get out of the situation and, step off of Harvey Keitel, who's trying to still breathe and gasp for air. And then she, Farrah walks Kirk off with his bare ass and right in the light. They've lit his ass and he's walking away.
Yeah.
It's a memorable moment for sure. Not just for this film, but for all film in 1980.
For all of film history, I would say. Right. But then Keitel grabs some kind of piece of machinery or whatever and wallops Kirk Douglas over the head, and he goes to drag out Farrah again, but then Hector gets involved, and Hector lashes out with his robot claw and friggin' cuts off Harvey Keitel's hand right off.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah.
That's it for Keitel out of the movie. You'd think there would be a more sort of detailed killing scene, but that's all we get until later we see what has happened to him. But that's pretty much it for his character in the movie. He's gone now.
I was really confused by that too, because I was like, is that because we didn't see him again for a while, and I was like, were we to accept that, and you were like, did he bleed to death, with getting his hand severed? It was just kind of it was an interesting way to go about it with him. I just would have expected, yes, we do get more later, but with that, it was I felt very unsatisfied. I felt like he needed a bigger end. Well,
I would say they cut something out, but then I think they're trying to play it as a mystery because later the reveal is kind of a reveal.
Well, I was going to say that, by this point in the film, I'm used to them cutting right out of scenes in the middle, like we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
So I just assumed, okay, they're cutting the film for a certain running time. They're like, okay, the audience gets it, he's dead. Okay, or we'll just move on now, like they've been doing for the past hour. So I just kind of assumed, all right, that's their style for this film, is just, all right, next scene.
I also kind of feel like in movies from the 70s, until like sort of the slasher genre really came into vogue and like gore became a real thing, I feel like deaths were sort of more understated. Like I remember seeing stuff from the 70s where people would get like thrown into a wall and they'd fall down and they'd be like, oh, he's dead. Like we all understand, like if you hit a wall, you're dead. If you lose a hand, you're dead.
Right.
Now it's like, that's not good enough. We need to see the person die on screen or they're not fucking dead.
And they need entrails or head trauma or something.
Blood splatter across the wall.
Things were more understated then. But yes, the next section of the movie is sort of my least favorite section of the movie. And this sort of has become a trend and stuff that we talk about. I always feel like this like second half of the second act I'm always hardest on this point, because like there's a lot of things going on. The movie's trying to pick up momentum or whatever. And I usually find myself struggling with these sections of movies. But we get this sort of cat and mouse thing where Adam and Alex are trying to escape to Benson's ship because, there's a killer robot. They just got to get the fuck out of there. But, they've got to sneak under the floors and the robot's following them above the floor. And then they got to trick Hector with this like waste trap or something where they take these panels out from the floor, but then they put the top panels back so that the heavy robot will then fall through the panel into this like icy...
Yeah, it's like an icy cold water of some kind.
Yeah.
At one point we've seen Kirk Douglas like blowing some kind of waste into that underwatery area or whatever. They set it up very briefly, whatever it is.
But we get Farrah then too, like after they've set that up. I just thought like Hector's not gonna fall for this. Like she's like, come here, Hector. Come here, it's okay. Come over here. And I'm like, no, Hector's not gonna go for any of this.
No, he gets wise. He picks up like a space rock and like chucks it into the thing. And Adam is smart and he's like hiding behind this other robot arm, and he just uses the robot arm to then knock Hector into the icy water or whatever. But, they go running out and then Hector just blows up the ship anyway remotely. So they're fucked.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that shuttle, which was cool. It looked like a giant like fly head, the way that this was designed.
Totally, yeah.
But yeah, that's right. They're running to it and they think, okay, we've done it. And then I guess Hector has he goes to the console and blows the thing up.
Yeah, so Hector takes control, but Kirk Douglas is like, he doesn't want to kill us because he could have killed us if he wanted to by just blowing us up in the ship or whatever. So they know that Hector wants to use them for some purpose. And the purpose is just, I guess, to run the space station or whatever. And I guess to get it on with Farrah Fawcett or something later. Although I don't know how he's going to do that, but we can probably imagine something. He's speaking to them over like the PA and stuff, and he's using Benson's voice. And we actually see like Benson's face on like a screen for a minute. So they're like, oh, is it Benson? Is he still alive?
Yeah, they're very surprised Benson's back. They're like, holy shit, he didn't die. He's alive. Oh my God.
And so they walk into like, I don't know, the main room or whatever. And Hector's up in like this DJ booth or whatever.
That was my first thought. I'm like, what the, they were in the disco portion of this place.
You're like, have I spun in that booth?
I mean, it's so funny you say that because I literally I have my notes here of like the DJ booth in the hydroponics lab.
Yeah, so they look up to the DJ booth and Hector's in there, but he's now wearing Benson's head. Yes. So we get like this Harvey Keitel prosthetic on top of the robot. Sadly, this look is not carried through the rest of the movie. Like I would have been like, let's just work this through the end of the movie.
Yeah, it would have been really cool because it looks great. I mean, the prosthetics just on, because it's weird. Like it's because it's sort of half his head.
Yeah.
Sort of stuck, like wedged onto the little bead. Yeah, mushed on it. So it's kind of half of Keitel's face, but the rest of it's just grizzle. And I'm like, oh man, if the rest of the movie is Hector walking around with Keitel's head on its little bitty eyeballs, I'm like, man, we're home free. This we're set. This is perfect.
5 stars.
I'm sorry.
The horror of this moment is just so intense that I guess Farrah faints and we don't even know what happens to Kirk Douglas. He's just like, my God, or whatever, and then fade out, right? And then Kirk Douglas just wakes up and he's like in bed. Like, so what the fuck happened there? Like,
well, you automatically think, oh, they're not doing it was all a dream bit. Like, oh,
right.
What the hell? Because he's like, wake up, he's looking around, he's like, oh man, that was wow, what a crazy night's what a crazy dream.
Man, those blue dreamers were intense.
Blue dreamers. Yes.
Well, it's funny. You kind of think that for a second. You think, oh, maybe this is all part of some crazy nightmarish thing from the drugs when they take them.
Totally.
Which I would have been I'm not a fan of the whole it was all a dream bit, but for this it would have been kind of a cool misdirect. Like okay, that would have almost worked, I think. But
sadly, that's not the case. Adam just wakes up to find out he's got one of those like links in his brain for some nefarious reason. They're now out of the shadow lock, as they call it. They're out of this eclipse, so now they can reestablish contact with the colonies or whatever. And like this really cheesy sort of Flash Gordon-y looking spaceship comes flying by, and they're like, we're just checking on you. We're doing a survey, making sure you're okay. And Kirk Douglas goes to respond. But then Hector responds in his voice. The guys in the survey ship are like, let's talk to that little cutie you got there or whatever.
How's our favorite space girl doing?
That's right. That's right.
And then Hector speaks to them in her voice. So they realize that now Hector is going to just pretend to be them if anybody comes to try to save them or whatever. And Hector keeps talking about, like, you need to fulfill your duties or whatever. He's got some sort of nebulous plans for them that we don't really fully understand.
He just kind of picks up where Keitel left off when he's bitching at him in the beginning of the movie. Like, you guys aren't growing vegetables fast enough. Or, you guys aren't getting food to Earth fast enough. You're 2 months behind on your research. And so you think, all right, this crazy-ass robot wearing Harvey Keitel's head on top of it is just be like, all right, well, get back to work. And that's basically all it did. I'm like, don't you want to do something cooler maybe? But no, It's like, you guys, you gotta get back on those sprouts.
Yeah, this needed to like evolve into something really bizarre, like some crazy robot sex world or something. Like it needed to just get completely insane here. And sadly, it just kind of is like, well, I guess we're going to be slaves to the robot or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, well, even if the robot is getting like learning from Harvey Keitel's character, it's like, why did Harvey Keitel I guess because he had failed his exams and was deemed to be unstable, he just decided to leave with this and like continue working.
Yeah, was the plan really to increase productivity at this hydroponic?
That's what I'm saying. Like, who gives a fuck about the hydroponic plant? Like, you've got Hector. You could do so many other things, and it's like, what a boring ass like thing to do. Where it's just like, I mean, and Harvey Keitel's gone now, and he's dead, and Hector's just like, grow things faster, work, and it could have been so much more bonkers.
There's no evil scheme. There's nothing that either Keitel or the robot want that's nefarious, really. I mean,
it's just middle management.
Honestly, this seems like a pretty efficient new system.
Benson was just upset because he sucked at his job, but he still wanted to keep doing his job. Like, that's kind of like, I felt, like he wasn't succeeding on the space station or whatever. And like, the guy like ridiculed him and he was like, I'm going to go do my job somewhere else.
I'm going to kill somebody to do it for the privilege.
What a nerd.
It's like you go in and kill everybody at your office so that you can like do their jobs for them.
Because you could do them better. Like, you think you could do it better, and they like all like shamed you that you were shitty, and you're like, I'm gonna murder everyone and I'm gonna run the best office.
Yeah. I feel like maybe there was something more there that got cut out. Like he had some sort of plan to do something evil or whatever.
Seb, the movie's 82 or 88 minutes long. It's funny when we went to watch it, check the running time, like, okay, let's see what kind of night we're in for. And it says 84 minutes long or 88 minutes long. And for the movie they're selling you for that running time, you automatically think, all right, something has gone wrong at some point. Yeah. And they're just trying to salvage what was left, because there's nothing wrong with a short movie. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But for the movie they're making and the story they're telling, it's not an 88-minute endeavor. It's there are parts missing from this robot.
Yes.
The only way out of this situation, Adam figures, is to strap some bombs or whatever to himself and go in and confront Hector. You know, he makes sure that Farrah is not in the way. In fact, he yells at her like, "Get the hell away from me," or whatever, and like pushes her across the room. She doesn't know what's going on. And then Hector's like, "I'm going to put this needle in your port or whatever and make you do what I want you to do," or something like that. And then Kirk Douglas keeps kind of being like moving away from the needle and saying some lines like, "But it wasn't your fault. But it wasn't his fault." It's a really weird.
This goes on for a really long time. And they keep zooming in on the port too, and the needle like getting closer to it, and then like the dialogue between them.
And then he moves his head and he's like, "It wasn't James's fault," he says, who was the pilot that was supposed to come.
Right.
It's completely nonsensical. Definitely something was cut out here because this doesn't make any sense. He's not even saying anything pertinent to the scene. It's really weird. But yeah, he basically just grabs hold of Hector and pushes him into the frozen water waste tank thing or whatever. And then they both blow up. And we get this crazy, like, slow motion water with like the parts of the robot like falling in the water. And this like goes on for like a minute, just like cascading water with robot parts. It's really weird.
Again, no parts of Adam, because I had to double check. I was like, did Adam blow up too?
Yeah, I'm sure they just couldn't do it because of ratings or whatever.
No, and that it's fine, but no, and I get it. It wouldn't have fit with the rest of the tone of the film anyway, because that's not what they were doing. But I'm just saying, I guess because I'm so used to gore now, I was just like, I had to double check. I'm like, so Adam sacrificed himself, right? Like he blew up too.
Well, apparently I had read that Lou Braid didn't like the violence and gore, and so I think apparently he objected to the to James's murder. I think either the original version of, I guess, it was worse or bigger or whatever, and I guess the mandate was to tone all that down. Okay. And so that's why we don't. I think that's why we don't see any, because it's like you said, the opening of the movie, you see James get bisected by these razor wires or whatever they are, and in the very end, all you see is water splash and mechanical pieces flying for a very long time.
Well, maybe they were thinking people didn't want to see Kirk Douglas's guts all over the place. You know,
we saw everything else earlier.
Yeah. This is true. So that's it for Hector, and the end of the movie is one last scene of Farrah on this shuttle or whatever, this like commuter shuttle or something, going to Earth, and she's looking out the window at Earth, and we see Earth, and it looks like it's part mechanical at this point. Like,
oh, yeah.
I think that's kind of supposed to be the big scary sting, is like Earth is like a robot too or whatever. Like it looks like it's got like a big computer chip continent on it or something.
I just thought it was a shitty model of Earth. I didn't even think, like, I was like, this looks bad. But it also, when Farrah's on this passage to Earth, the shuttle to Earth or whatever, first thing they do is offer her a little plate of drugs, and she's like, no.
That's right. I forgot about that.
No more drugs for me.
And it's funny you mention that, because the movie ends with this, she's, and they make a big, it's quick, but they make a big deal about that. Like she's in this new world of all very, very foreign to her. The fact that she's going to Earth, and you get the commuter, the guy in the speaker going, next train to Earth is in 5 minutes or whatever it is. And so she's all like wide eyed and wow, what's going on? And then I guess I think she gets in the ship and sits at the seat, and we see that last shot of Earth, and then it's over. But it feels like the way that they build that scene up, where she's so wide eyed and everything, there's so much that was in the movie about her getting to Earth and the whether it's a mystical thing or like she's curious about it, or there's some sort of they got all of that. So the way the scene plays out now in the movie, it feels like it was supposed to be some big moment for her character,
right? That
is just flat. Like she's just like, okay, she's all like, wow, this is wow, this is all cool.
You don't know what she thinks. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know if she's looking at it in awe. You don't know if she's looking at it in horror. Like, oh my God, this isn't what I thought. You know, like, that's what I was assuming, just because we've been in sort of a horror movie. So I'm just assuming that she's looking at Earth and being like, oh, this wasn't what I expected. But I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's not enough there to even be able to make a reading.
It's like trying to do, like, you know, that last shot of Planet of the Apes or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, this is what's really happening or whatever, but it doesn't do that or whatever. I mean, yeah, or just like the excitement of like, I'm going to Earth, or who knows.
I feel like Farrah definitely didn't know. Like, they weren't really
I know,
telling
poor
her. They're just like, just look out the window. And she's like, what kind of expression should I make? I don't know. We're not sure.
What am I seeing? What am I looking at?
But I'll tell you, they teased her hair beautifully. I mean,
Yeah.
what they did to her hair for that last moment where she's clearly dressed up for the occasion.
Yeah.
Because she's even in that. I think she's in like a similar green jumpsuit or something
Yep.
to what Keitel was wearing. It was not the same one, I don't think, but it was similar. And by the way, can we go back real quick to those pair of pants she had on? Kirk Douglas's clothing all looked like it was velour, but she had these great poofy MC Hammer style leather,
Yep.
like faux leather pants on, which looked awesome. They were such a cool pair of pants. But she's in a similar outfit to like what he shows up in to go to Earth.
Well, maybe they're like the space suits you're supposed to wear or whatever.
But she even, like, when she was on the back at the ship with Adam, like you were talking about with the pants, I think that was the same outfit where she had like all this great jewelry too. Like she had like some really like intricate like bracelets, and I mean, it was like quite a getup for, you know, growing veggies in space.
Yeah, in the chest scene, she's got some crazy shit like hanging off her head. Like she's got some sort of weird like jewelry that's like hanging off the side of her face.
I love all the outfits. All the outfits are A+.
Oh, we forgot to mention too their little tattoos they have on the side of their head.
Yeah,
right.
So they set that up, and this goes back to what we're talking about, where they set up these great ideas, and then everything just gets abandoned. And the idea that their little,
They call it a scan.
their scan, right? But it's a communication device of some kind, isn't it? Or like it's a data chip.
I thought it was like almost like a passport or something, because Keitel looks at hers and he says, "Oh, I can see you haven't been to Earth."
Oh, right.
He can tell that by looking at that thing. You have this thing on your head, and then when you go somewhere, it scans you and they know where you are. That's all I could come up with. The movie doesn't tell you.
No, and it's so like, it's something that you notice, of course, right off at the bat in the beginning, but the three of us like completely forgot about it because it doesn't go anywhere. It's like someone put a data port back here and just like sucked that part out, and Hector has that memory. I don't have it anymore.
All right, so the budget for this thing was $10 million, which was a lot of money in 1980, and it only cleared $9 million worldwide.
Wow, that was 9 million worldwide.
Worldwide altogether. So it did not even make its production budget back, and I'm sure with marketing and all of that, they lost a lot of money on this thing. So let me ask you guys, Mark, why do you think this movie failed?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there's a strange weirdness about it that I think, people just don't resonate with films that are, they just feel odd from the start. It's not like it's a particularly violent movie. It's not like it's a particularly offensive film in any way. It's just kind of there. And then as it progresses, it gets weirder and weirder. The robot looks strange. Keitel's acting strange. And obviously the selling point was Farrah. And, she's in a lot of great outfits. And I think you see her topless once or twice, I think, in the movie very briefly.
Yep.
Yes, you do.
But, even that, it's a lot of elements that just, I think, like you said earlier, it just doesn't gel. And I think, the word gets out about that pretty quick. I imagine Buzz probably killed this movie. And I actually read Roger Ebert review of the film earlier today where he gave it 1 star.
Yep.
And called it, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of breathtakingly stupid. So, you get Ebert out there telling everybody. And I have not seen the trailer for this, but I can only imagine the trailer makes as much sense as the film. And, it's one thing to see the trailer for Alien where it's a lot of strange images and scenes that don't connect, but at least they're compelling and they're like scary and they're suspenseful. And in this, the robot is cool when you're 11 years old, but if you're an adult and you see this film, you're kind of, it's like we talked about. It's off-putting in a lot of ways. Maybe too creepy, maybe too strange, maybe too weird.
Yeah, it's tonally weird. I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling or caring about a lot of this. Like I'm not scared. Farrah is definitely a huge draw. It was for me even to watch it now. I was like, ooh, yeah, Farrah. And I like Kirk Douglas and I like Harvey Keitel too, but I'm like, it's a weird combination of those three also. Especially having the love interest with Kirk Douglas and Farrah is just a little odd. And I mean, maybe too, just because Alien was such a big deal, this was not going to, it wasn't even really trying to be Alien, really. I mean, that might have helped him out a little bit more, like at least to get people into the theater if they would have tried to ape Alien a bit more, I guess. I don't know. I mean, look, I enjoyed it. I look forward to watching it again. But I don't know who the hell this was for. Like when it came out,
That's
like who was it for? Like you said, I mean, you said, Mark, like what you were saying about the robot, like who is that for? Like, I don't know. And then you got Farrah and like, that's a different group of people too. So I don't know. It's just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're both saying really makes a lot of sense. I do feel also that the whole sort of sci-fi wave that was happening at the time, this was still pretty earlier in the game. We didn't really know what the formula was for these things so much. You had Star Wars and that was one thing. And then Alien was the next big hit. And that's totally different. They're not even really relatable in a way. So I think people were just grasping at straws, like, I don't put a robot in Frankenstein in space,
Right.
Now in hindsight, I think we can look at this and be like, well, no, clearly you got to do more here with this. And like we talked about, this needs to be longer. This needs to be more developed. I just don't think they knew what the formula was for a successful sci-fi horror film in 1980, because like Alien had sort of, set the template, and, later we'd get more successful sort of takes on that, like with Terminator and the whole formula got more refined. This feels to me like a real, like, I don't know what we're doing. People like spaceships. Let's put a spaceship. People like Farrah Fawcett. Let's put her in there. Like, it just feels like grasping at a lot of straws. The whole movie feels like a big grasping at straws. Even the story and the way it's assembled and everything. It feels slapdash. So I think that's kind of what it is. And I think Mark is absolutely right. I remember at the time the reviews of this, they were abysmal. There was like the Ebert review that you quoted, and his word was pretty much God at that point, like 1980. Yeah. So like if he panned it, like it was probably dead in the water. And, I mean, I think there was interest in it when it first came out. Then I think word of mouth was probably pretty toxic. And so, yeah, I think all of those things add up to a box office bomb.
And the thing is, I mean, the idea of doing a Frankenstein in space concept, there's a lot to play with there. There's a lot of cool ideas that you could come up with. And so, for me, remakes are kind of hit and miss, depends on what you're doing. But, I've always believed you remake movies that didn't work originally or didn't do well for whatever reason. And I think there's a movie in Saturn 3 that would work if it was given, the right amount of thought and time to develop. And so, look, if they're going to remake something, it's Saturn 3.
I kind of agree with you. I think Saturn 3 would be a great remake.
I agree with both of you. And I was thinking as you were talking that it also could be more well received just now than like you were saying back then, where it's like the sci-fi horror genre was Alien, and then like what else are we doing, right? And now there's been so much, like anything goes now. I mean, like we were watching, our double feature on Saturday was Hellraiser 4 in space, and then going into the space theme, Saturn 3, because you have Jason Jason X.
Spacin'? Did you say Spacin'?
Spacin', yeah.
I don't think I heard that.
I think I got that from Seth.
Nicely done. I like that.
Thank you.
But like that's happened now, so I think this would have had more of a shot as far as like what can be done in sci-fi horror. And I think there were a lot of good ideas. I wonder what the film, like Farrah had said in that interview, like it was something different before, what came out of it. Because it does, as we've talked about extensively, just feel so cut up. And then also, I think, sorry, I'm not like I'm a gore hound. I mean, I love horror, but I think, this would benefit from nowadays being able to have more gore in it.
I could see Netflix cranking out a remake of this for streaming. No problem.
Yeah.
Just throw I don't know, whoever the hot pop star is in the Farrah role and some older guy in the Kirk Douglas role. Throw a few more people in there to die. And
yes.
You got a movie.
They need more deaths.
Just add a few characters just so they get killed.
Yeah, a little slasher element going. I get they're trying to do a small little claustrophobic piece, but you got to put a few more deaths in there.
If we remake Saturn 3, we're not killing Sally this time.
No.
The dog is going to get to live.
No.
Or at least get turned into a robot dog. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Oh,
something.
Yes. Well, that's the twist. Like an Alien, the dog is actually the android.
Right.
See, this thing writes itself. The remake is happening right now.
Don't broadcast this. Don't put this podcast up. We have gold here. Don't let someone steal our ideas.
No. This is all for us.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go take a blue dreamer and grow a brain out of fetuses and brain link into a homicidal robot.
As you're wont to do.
Just a Monday night here in Oregon.
That about does it today for Tentpole Trauma. If you like what you heard, check out our social media presence on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Just look for Tentpole Trauma. That was easy, wasn't it? If you like us, hit subscribe and leave us a sterling review on iTunes, if you dare. If you really like us, head over to patreon.com and get involved in one of our fabulous tiers. You'll be glad you did. Want to communicate with Tentpole Trauma? Send an email to tentpoletrauma@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And who knows, one day you may even get your email read on one of our shows. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you real soon.